Usul al-Fiqh is understanding not just the evidence, because some people will say, well, if they just go back to the book and Sunnah and Ijma, that's what everyone's agreed upon, and that'll just solve all these issues. No, because these differences of opinion between the Sahaba occurred because of more than that. Because if you say, okay, well, we'll just go back to the book and the Sunnah, okay, let's put to the side what's abrogated, what's abrogating. When do you take an ayah, and an ayah limits an absolute ayah? So you have an ayah that's absolute. Okay, don't do this. When is it limited by another ayah? Well, that has to do with how you approach an ayah. Now, if we're looking at our understanding, Anas ibn Malik, Utbah ibn Ghazwan, Abdullah ibn Umar, and others, so between 3 and 10,000 Sahaba, their understanding of how that's limited. Then you come to the Tabi'een. So now you're looking at Al-Hasan Al-Basri. You're looking at Ar-Ru'asi, who also taught Imam Ahmad. Nafi ibn Nafi Ar-Ru'asi Al-Harithi is the teacher of Imam Ahmad, which is one of the ways of how we know Ahmad is a tabi'i, taught by a tabi'i. So, Ahmad is pulling from this tradition and is then explaining it. So it's not just going to the evidences, is when are certain evidences given precedence over other evidences? And how do we know that this evidence is mutlaq, absolute, and this one is muqayyid, it's restricted? How do we know this one is makhsus, it's specific, and this one is aam, it's general? And when do we give these considerations weight? Like, when do we give this one precedence over this one? That's part of what Usul is about. And that's part of what the Shaykh rahimahullah tried to really impart to us, is when you go out into the world teaching people in specifics, teaching these texts and teaching people and answering questions in the religion, you need to know what's absolute. So often he would ask us, he'd say, so there'd be a ruling that would come up, and he'd say, is this ruling absolute or is it aam? Because there's a difference between something being absolute, mutlaq, and being aam. There's a difference. And so we would try to answer, and he'd say, well, no, it's because of this and then this.
Subhanallah.
Or he'd say, yes, that's correct, because of this and this, right? But he would do this at the beginning of the class or at the end. Whereas the Egyptians that I learned from tend to say they'll be in the middle of the class. So there'll be this constant breakage, stop and start, stop and start. And the class is very lively and busy. Whereas our class with Sheikh Muhammad Ahmad Al-Rashid is different, right? It would be after we did the tahqiq al-masa'il. So he said, from when we last came together, we discussed this. And so he'd say, I want you to read through the whole metin of what we did last class. So let's say we did a bab in the last class. We'd read the metin of the whole bab. And then we'd start from the commentary from where we last left off at. But we'd go through the whole metin of the last bab to refresh our memory, and then ask us comprehension questions. So this statement of his, is this muqayyid or is it mutlaq? Right? Or sometimes you do things like, is this muqayyid or is it makhsus? Because there's a distinction between those. Is it restricted or is it specific? Now, if you have the answer to the first thing, you'll know the answer to the second. But if you're confused, then you'll be confused about the second. And this is important for being able to answer questions about things, because it's also to do with how to find evidence as well in the book and sunnah and the ijma. How do you find ijma? Like, this is another thing. People say, oh, well, you should just go what everyone's agreed upon. How do you find what everyone's agreed upon?
Yeah.
Because in every era, there are scholars that, okay, we've agreed upon this. How do you find it? And there's some books, because this is another thing. When you look at kutub and fiqh as well, there are masa'il that are open that get closed. So the four madhabs scholars, they're agreed upon, like 85% of matters, they're agreed upon. That 15, though, is where they will differ, where you'll find these distinguishing characteristics. And each madhab will have things where there are masail that are open.
Interesting.
Now, as you get into different eras, there'll be times where masail get closed. And that gets reflected in other books. But then new masa'il get opened up because, as we know, human experience is changing, so new things come. So if you look at Dalil al-Nasik, which is by Abdul Ghani al-Lubadi rahimahullah, it's a book on Hajj, but also covers matters to do with Hajj and Umrah. In that topic, he closed like 10 masa'il. He closed them. And by closing these masa'il, especially with respect to, I thought it was a brilliant thing that he did, with respect to, there's ladies that go on Hajj. And sometimes ladies will get, even if they take a medicine that prevents it, they'll get their monthly cycle. But they'll get the monthly cycle at certain points of the Hajj, either the final tawaf or at Muzdalifah, or they get them at different times. Okay, how do you deal with that issue? And Imam Abdul Ghani al-Lubadi rahimahullah, he closed that masala in a brilliant way. And he answered the question 4 different ways. And he closed the masala. There were other times where he was asked topics. He says, I looked through the kutub and I found that no one had closed this masala. And he said, La hawla wa la quwwata illa billah, it's been left to me. Now I've got to close it. So now for the mufti, he needs to find, was this masala closed? Because when people ask him a question, when people ask the mufti a question, hey, I've heard about this issue, such and such and such and such and such and such. He then needs to say, oh, the mu'tamid is this. Or he says, okay, there's a difference of opinion. If there's a difference of opinion and the masala is still open, then he can say, there's a difference of opinion about this. I advise you to do this. He can say that because maybe he's looking at the conditions of the people, the condition of the person. But he can't say the ruling is this, or the dependent upon, or the final position. He can't do that because that would involve him ijtihad and tafaqquh and things where he's got to go into the text to do that. If a masala is still open or a masala has been closed, he needs to find out. Because someone says, oh yeah, I was speaking to someone and they said this and this and this issue. Then he would say, and no, actually, that is true. That was a difference of opinion. However, this issue was resolved by so-and-so. And sometimes other muftoon will write him a letter as well. And there's ways like we had to be taught, like, how does a mufti answer a fatwa? Like, answering a question is different to formally writing out a fatwa. So, okay, your fatwa has your prologue, your preamble, your body, your closing remarks, and then the tawqi', and then your signature or whatever else. Right? So there's a way that a fatwa is supposed to look. And that's why sometimes I will publish on the blog, or I'll put up things like I'll translate it, but then I'll put like the PDF of the Arabic so that people can see, okay, this is what, like, for example, what some of the Iraqi sheikhs said about the COVID issue. Right? I put the original Arabic of that fatwa so people can say, this is what a fatwa looks like. You see, this is the prologue, this is this is that, so they can see it. So when muftoon send letters to other muftoon, this was brought to my attention, and I checked these books and I checked this area and I found this. Is that what you found as well? It's like, yes, I found that. However, I found that so-and-so who came after mentioned this, then it gets closed. Or sometimes maraja people, subhanallah, they'll send a letter to another maraja and they're afraid to answer the question.
Right.
So they'll send it to him in the hope that he'll answer it. And this happened with Shaykh Ad-Dahiyyan. He sent this to Abdul Qadir Badra. He asked about
the Jum'ah.
About the Jum'ah, because at the time there was only one jami in Kuwait. And so he's like, yeah, maybe he'll.
Yeah, very fascinating fatwa.
Maybe he'll answer it.
SubhanAllah.
So he's like, yeah, let me send it to him. It's like, he could have answered it.
Right.
He could have answered it. But he's like, no, I'm afraid I don't want to deal with that. So let me go ahead and send it to him. He's like, Sheikh. So he starts off, says some kind words, some good pleasantries, everything else to try to set the table. And he asked him actually a bundle of questions. This was within it. He asked him first about the Mu'tamid Kutub. Then he asked him like about a number of questions. And this was within that bundle. So the Imam Abdul Qadir Badran Ad-Dumi rahimahullah, he answers it, right, and then sends it back. But you see the layout of the fatwa,
Yes.
like he says, the same thing with his fatwa on hunting with firearms, right? You see the layout, like look at the layout, like he starts off with the preamble.
Yeah, like
then
defining
everything else.
terms,
That's it, defining
the general
terms,
ruling.
all that stuff. Like that's what you have to do.
Right.
That's the job of, now him being a marja, he still does mufti things, because a marja is all of what he is in every category down there. So the marja is a marja, but he's also a faqih. He's also a mufti. He's also like all the things that go under that. The marja is that and everything under it, right? So the mufti has to look at, when he receives these questions, what do I do with this? How do I answer these questions, right? My issue, as I've said before, is I have a tendency to be long-winded. But it's because I've been in these Anglophone countries and there's so much deception and lying where I've had to answer questions in this long-winded fashion in order to avoid people using me as a crutch for haram or lying, or people that have false misgivings where I have to, first of all, I must unpack those misgivings.
Indeed.
Right? So sometimes I have to give long-winded answers when people ask me, when people use terms like Sufi, Athari, Ashhari, Maturidi. These are loaded terms in English. They're not within an ilm environment, but they're loaded in English. Because so when they're saying Ashhari, are they, is it AICP? Is it like, what are they talking about? So I have to unpack all of this, which causes this long-winded answer. Oh, can you get to the point? Well, no, because you don't get to the point, because you've come here with preconceived notions.
Yes.
And I have to unpack these preconceived notions. So because of that, the Sheikh often said to me, his answer is long. Just give us the
just want the masala.
Just give us the answer to the masala, because I'm like, well, the evidence for this is that. I didn't ask you that. I'm not asking for any evidence. I'm asking you.
Didn't ask you for both researching.
Yeah, I didn't ask you for all that. I'm just asking you this to check your understanding. Yeah, the understanding is this. So you would have to say, yeah, Abu Ja'far, you don't need to do this. But it's because of that. Because of the training where I was constantly, because in Anglophone countries, I'm surrounded by Ahl Bid'ah all the time. So we learn to use vocabulary and evidence as a weapon. That's what, because that's what Shaykh Wali taught us. Like, I'm going to give you the proof so you could use this as a weapon. So that the enemies of Allah, he said, what you'll find is the enemies of Allah, they never have evidence. And what happens is their evidence actually becomes your evidence. And I've seen that in conversations where, they're trying to argue with you, and then you say, well, where's your evidence? And then you disarm them.
Yes.
And their evidence becomes your evidence. And so that's what we've been taught. We've been taught, I could say albeit the best way I suppose is we were taught a very confrontational way in dealing with mas'ala asking. We've been taught a confrontational way of tackling it. And the Sheikh's like, you don't need to do that. Just this. So I often, when he'd ask me a question, other brothers in all, they like, you'd see like something in like the chat would be like taweel, and Arabic would be written like, it's going to be long.
SubhanAllah.
It's like, it's not though. It's not my intent. It's just because of how I was trained. So it's like, you don't need to do that here. It's okay. Just give the mas'ala. So his attitude of training us is training us to understand the mas'ala, to understand the point, because when the common man is coming to you, he might just, and based upon how he's asking you the question, you need to answer it that way. If he didn't ask you for any evidence, then you don't need to worry about that. If he says, is this or not? Then you say, is this? That's it.
Yeah.
Now, if he's asking follow-up, then that's different. Yeah, now you give evidence or whatever else. Because I've heard some people say it's because you have to remember, as we discussed before, this person he's asking, he might be asking, but he might not be asking for himself either. He has to carry that answer back.
Right.
So if you give him all this stuff, and he's got to carry that back with him. And you have to hope that he's going to remember all these points that you gave him.
Right.
Give him something that's truncated enough to where he can remember it and carry it back. Because
some people, they've heard differing positions, and because the people who told them might themselves have been confused. For example, they asked the question in regards to fasting in Sha'ban. Now, sometimes you will have to provide the different evidences so that they may understand it better, and you can expel these doubts that they have.
That's correct. And this will often happen, or people will think, okay, well, if I can do qada of these som, well, and because people have heard, okay, well, I can do a dual intention. Well, can't I do a dual intention to make up the fasts I've missed in Ramadan and the 6 fasts of Shawwal? That seems reasonable. So then you have to like unpack that and say, no, you can't do that. Right? Because they may have heard someone, or maybe they've reasoned it through themselves and thought, well, if I can do a dual intention for the Som Ihtiyat for Ramadan, where it's like, okay, I'm not sure whether the Hilal of Ramadan is behind that cloud or not because of this issue or that issue, so I'll do a Som Ihtiyat in the case of this. Okay, well, couldn't I do the same thing for the 6th of Shawwal and making up Ramadan? Like, well, no. Those don't fit because of this reason. So it's important to understand that. But if they're not asking for that level of detail, then you try to keep things short because they're coming, how they address you is how you must answer in most cases, right? But if they come with, if there's loaded language or they're using technical terms and you can tell that they don't understand technical terms, right? It's like, okay, yeah, I've heard some guy, he was saying something that we're this and that, but I've never heard of that. Is it so? Okay, now you have to explain. Right. So it's like my grandparents didn't know anything about Ash'ari Maturid. They never heard of that. They never heard of that. They never heard any of this stuff about Istiwa being a stawla, or they didn't know a thing about that. I know they didn't. So those were never conversations. And when these issues were brought up, they were like, I'm confused. I don't understand. So you have to look at the person that you're dealing with and the questions that they ask. And that's part of what the Shaykh Muhammad Ahmad Rashid, rahimahullah, part of what he did as well is studying the kitab, understanding what's inside of the kitab. And there's the masa'il that are zahira, that are manifest, meaning that's what's in the text. But then there's masa'il that are mafhuma, that are understood, that are behind the text. But you can only understand those if you have a depth of understanding of what's in the text itself. And this is what happens is a lot of people, if they study the text by themselves or not with someone who's proficient in the text, they understand just the external part, but they can't understand the things that you can take away from the text. So for example, Zad al-Mustaqni' has like thousands of masail that are taken from the text itself. But unspoken masail, there's about 2,300 unspoken masail. Now who's going to need to know those unspoken masail? The faqih, the mufti, they'll need to know those. The unspoken masail,
right?
The unspoken things to answer other queries and questions, because sometimes one line, like for example, the last dars that we did in the Zad, this issue came up where you have 2 types of wealth that are mixed. From that one sentence, it was just like 4 words. From that sentence came 2 qaida fiqhiyah that cover like mini bab in fiqh, many different sections in fiqh. Like from that one, it's just like 4 words were in that sentence. 2 qaida fiqhiyah, like 2 fiqh rulings, 2 fiqh rules came from that cover many masail. So it's important for the person to understand that. That's going to be, whether it's a mufti or whether they're going for tafaqquh, or if that, it's important to understand the unspoken masail and the masail that are mantuqa. It's important for you to understand, in the Hanbali madhab, to understand the ijma' that's sukuti and the ijma' that's nutuqi. So the spoken ijma' is what we're all clear on, where, okay, this is this and this goes with this. But then there's some things where we understand, say, ijma' sukuti, where a sahabi said, we did this action and did that. So, okay, well, no one opposed him. Therefore, that stands to reason. For us, that's an ijma' sukuti, where sometimes our scholars will say, well, la na'rifu khilafan fi, and we don't know of any khilaf in that issue. To us, it's ijma' sukuti. So we're not going to go against the qawl of a sahabi when he wasn't opposed by any other sahaba. We'll just take it, right? And that is more important to us than qiyas and ijtihad. If a sahabi is pronounced, so for us, we place a lot of emphasis on the fatawa of sahaba. place a lot of emphasis on the fatwa of Sahaba. If it's individual Sahabi, that's more important than, say, you doing qiyas and ijtihad. If you can use the fatwa of a Sahabi and build on that, that's better. And that's why, this is important to understand when you study these mutun, because often you'll find, especially Manat al-Sabil, you'll have like the author will say, and this is the fatwa and understanding of scholars such as Ibn Abbas, Abu Musa al-Ash'ari. It's like, whoa, he's quoting them as, so yeah, of course they're sources of fatwa. They're Sahaba. We don't just quote Majduddin ibn Taymiyyah, everything else. No, this is the fatwa of these Sahaba. And then they'll say, and the scholars that agreed with them are this, and this. So that'll often happen where there'll be a masala in Manat al-Sabil where it's like, there'll be a statement that's made and it'll say, and this is the position of Majduddin ibn Taymiyyah, Shamsuddin. It's like, okay, that's the Mu'tamad, because you hear the voices. Okay, those are Mu'tamad voices. This is position of Muwaffaq ibn Qudama, Shamsuddin ibn Qudama, Majduddin ibn Taymiyyah, and this agrees with, and then there'll be like 7 or 8 Sahaba mentioned. Right? So it helps you to understand the fatwa of the Sahaba. Oh, okay, this agrees with these Sahaba. Right? This agrees with these people. This agrees with this understanding. And so it's important to understand that. And he also did within the text as well, tarajim of different authors. So when we were going through the text, every time we mentioned someone that we hadn't discussed, he would give a tarjum on them. So the first time we went across Imam Muwaffaq ibn Qudama, he's like, who remembers when he lived from when he was died? Who remembers that? Okay, he is Muwaffaq ibn Qudama. Al-Muwaffaq is Muwaffaq ad-Din ibn Qudama, who is Abdullah ibn Ahmad ibn Muhammad ibn Qudama. He lived from 5. His sheikhs were so-and-so. Every single tarjuma he did.
Oh,
because they're quoted in the text.
Incredible. No.
He wrote this book. Like, for example, Al-Fa'iq is mentioned. Who wrote Al-Fa'iq?
Wow.
And it's like, well, the Fa'iq was written by Sharif Abu Ja'far. Very good. Very good. Now, who is Sharif Abu Ja'far? And they didn't give you the name of Sharif Abu Ja'far. He'd tell you. Or he went through, like, there's another one where it's like Al-Wajiz. Who wrote Al-Wajiz? It's like, okay, that's, and one brother, because there's a common confusion, because some people said that another author, there's like 2 Wajiz, and the Sheikh, he said, no. He says that's a historical misunderstanding. There's only one text in the madhahib that's called Al-Wajiz, and that is written by Al-Husayn al-Dujaili. That's it. That's 732. There is no other text known as Al-Wajiz. He says that's a historical. He said it's a waham. It's a notion that was understood by someone reading a text. He says that's actually not the case. It's actually not the case. There's wajiz. There's only a text. He said there might be a text that is a wajiz, because wajiz means like it's summarized with usul fiqh principles. He said there might be a text that has that quality, but a text by the name al-wajiz. There's only one text by the name al-wajiz, and that's by Ad-Dujaili. It's like, okay, understood. Because that can be a problem, because if you're looking for a mas'ala that's just in al-wajiz, because there are some kutub that have a mas'ala in them that isn't in other books. Like Akhsar al-Mukhtasarat has some masa'il that aren't in bigger books. So it's important to understand what these kutub are. But if you can't remember where it is, you're like, okay, where's the other wajiz? There is no other wajiz, akhi. You're on a wild goose chase. You're literally in rabbit holes that you're never going to get out of, because there is no rabbit hole. There is no other kitab. So it's important to understand who wrote what kutub, so you can get to the said kutub, and then also the placement of the kutub, so you don't go to Al-Mughni to find the Mu'tamad. You don't do that, right? So you understand where to find things, but there'll be times where Al-Mughni agrees with the Mu'tamad. So it says, okay, this is the Mu'tamad, and this was agreed upon by Al-Muwaffaq, and so on, so on, so on. So, or sometimes Ibn Dawayan is brilliant. He's a genius. He'll intentionally leave something, right? So he'll leave like aqwal, and he'll say, now, in Al-Mughni, Al-Muwaffaq has said this, but in Al-Kafi, he said this. So then it's like, Sheikh Muhammad Ahmad Rashid is like, okay, so what's the final ruling? Like, well, we don't know, because we're looking for like Shamsuddin or other people. We're looking for Al-Fatuhi's not mentioned. He's like, yep, Fatuhi's not mentioned. What do you do? I don't know. I mean, Measure D is not mentioned. Okay, so obviously Measure D has not been mentioned. He said, why hasn't Measure D been mentioned? It's like, well, because this masala isn't in al-Muharrar. It's like, okay, it's not in there. Okay, because what Measure D and Muwaffaqin agree upon, that's mu'tamid. But if it's not found, then you go to the books of Muwaffaqin Qudama out of the two. Okay, if it's there, so okay, al-Mughni is not mu'tamid. Okay, so that leaves al-Kafi. Okay, that's the final ruling. Because that's his final, al-Kafi is his final statement. Al-Mughni was his first statement when he's in Iraq. It's the first book he wrote. Then he gets back and he writes al-Umda. Then he writes al-Muqni'. Then he writes al-Kafi. Al-Kafi is his final statement to do with fiqh. He wrote other things. He wrote like a sharh on Kalwazani's Hidayah, and he wrote another one. But his final statement to do with fiqh is Kafi. Like, okay, this is it. It's final statement. Just like Bahuti's final statement on advanced matters of it is Daqa'iqul Nuhat. Like, this is my final thing. I got nothing else to say after this. So it's understanding that to get to the bottom line, right? It's understanding it, quoting this, going to this, going to that, understanding where things are found. So you see it less as a maze and more as a roadmap. Because a lot of people that approach fiqh books, fiqh is like a maze. Right. It's not meant to be a maze. Not if you're taught by good teachers, qualified teachers. If you're taught by qualified teachers, it's not a maze.
Yes.
It's a roadmap. So you'll be traveling on the road, then you come to a fork in the road. You say, Sheikh, I've got two turnings. I can turn left or right. Where do I go? Okay, you go left. Or I've got left, right, and straight. What do I do? Keep going straight. Okay. It's a roadmap. It's not a maze. Because a maze means there's all these different roads. You don't know where you're going to go. You get lost on every road. No, that's not the point of fiqh. For the layman, the point of fiqh is, I need to know, is this wajib, mustahab, makruh, haram, or just mubah? I just need to know what this is. That's all the layman's. I just need to know that. For those that are students knowledge above, okay, we're going to tell you why that's the case. Because we need to find out about this issue. What's this masala? What's the ayah hadith on the topic? Okay, now we need to get to the bottom of this for you. For the common man is, what's the root? That's why the common man always asks, what's the hukum? The hukum is like coming out the other side of the tube. Like, what's the end result? What do I got to do? I got to do this or not? That's all the common man wants to do. I got to do this or not? For those that are looking, it's like, okay, hold on. I'm going to find out. Yes, based upon this ayah, yeah, you got to do it. It's wajib. Okay, listen, I found this problem as well. Is it still wajib? No, it's not, because there's this now. Okay, alhamdulillah. Because the label will also say, yeah, but I thought that if I had this and this, because now he's thinking about what? Shurut. Even though he's not an usuli minded person, he's still sort of using them. I thought that if this and this is this. It's like, yeah, it's this. So he doesn't know words like muqayyid, but he's doing it. Because he has some sense of it, because this ummah has been infallibly protected collectively. So he's doing it without even realizing he's doing mutlaq and muqayyid. So now we have to answer, yeah, listen, you are correct in doing this in this case, but not in this case. How come? Well, because this and this and this. Oh, okay. Thank you. Often, so you see him again next time. So it is the job of the person to understand that. And that's what Sheikh Abu Anas was preparing us for, to understand, to grasp and to understand the data of unpacking these kutub, and understanding what a fiqh text is versus a hadith text. And he said something interesting to us. He says, a lot of people where they slip with this text, he says, is they come to the fiqh text and they'll find, like in Manat al-Sabil, he says, there are weak hadith that we mention in Manat al-Sabil. He says, but you don't understand. A hadith will be weak, but the point of this text is not for grading a hadith. The point of this text is fiqh. That's the point. The point is that you don't approach a fiqh text saying, oh, this hadith is weak, therefore cannot use. No, because there are other ahadith and other texts why that hadith is legitimate for use. For fiqh is not about grading the narrators, because by the time you've gotten to fiqh, you've already gone through that process. So you have to understand the job, and this is something Abdul Qadir Badran Ad-Dumi rahimahullah, he mentioned this. He said people have to understand the division of different scholars in Islam. The muhaddith, his whole purpose is to find the authenticity of the narrators in the chain of transmission and the text of the hadith. The faqih is finding the usul and masa'il in the said evidence or hadith for its use. It's different jobs. They're aware that that hadith is weak, but it's not weak enough to where these people are liars and it can't be used. That's not the point. That's not the point. It's the masa'il that are there. They're using different principles. So it's important to understand the application of these things.
Right.
Otherwise, when you're studying, and this is another point that he mentioned. He says you'll find that one of the stumbling blocks that happen to people is they start off reading ahkam books before they have their fiqh down. Mm-hmm. So they're confused. So someone will be like, oh yeah, well, I've been through Bulugh al-Maram, or I've been through Umdat al-Ahkam, and now we're doing this kitab. It's like, wait a minute, hold on. Why are you going in the opposite direction? Because you're supposed to be getting down the fiqh. Okay, listen, this is what nullifies it. You get that down first. The Umdat al-Ahkam or Bulugh al-Maram, that comes after. Mm-hmm. You don't do that first because it happens where it's like, well, I've done Umdat al-Ahkam or Bulugh al-Maram, and then I'm studying this, but Al-Hajjawi said this, but the hadith must not have reached it.
SubhanAllah.
Abandon this, or I'm confused because this text differs with this hadith. So then he thinks he knows.
Yes.
And then he wants to say, oh, I have to leave this issue because he said this, but this is da'if, or this can't be followed, so I have to follow. This is nothing to do with that. These are two different areas. The study of hadith, study of fiqh are two different areas. Like you don't even have your ahkam down yet. And you're studying things that are used for ahkam after the fact. Like you're studying completely opposite direction. And that's why you'll find and you've seen it because we've had these conversations where there's people that have said the stuff that they've mentioned, but they're proper confused about fiqh and what they're like they're proper confused. Mm-hmm. It's like, how is that happening? The evidence is clear as well. Yeah, the evidence is so clear he's confused. What happened to him? Because he's not established on anything. And that's the thing that the Sheikh frequently warned us about was about getting established on something.
Wow.
And staying established and staying firm on knowledge and following the pattern of knowledge. And the reason why the Sheikh stressed us about his teachers, which we'll come to in a moment, the reason why the Sheikh stressed to us about his teachers and everything else is it showed a pattern.
Okay.
He was taught a pattern by his teachers.
That's very fascinating.
He was taught a pattern. He was taught a curriculum. The same way we've discussed that I was taught, we were taught a pattern so that we can go in a certain direction. And okay, all right. So I go from here, then here, here, then here, and we can track our progress here, then here, here, then here. It's not all over the place. You find people that they're going through they're trying to go through either by themselves or unqualified big books, and then they try to go through the small books. What are you doing? What are you doing? You have to go small and then build up. Why are you trying to go through these big things? It's like you don't even understand what it is you're looking at in this kitab. You don't even understand what you're looking at. And then when they go to the smaller books, this is subhanAllah, it's very strange. They find the smaller books very arcane. Because the smaller books were supposed to prepare you for the big ones. But what happened is because you tried to go through the big ones, got confused, everything else, now the small books seem mysterious.
Yes.
It's like a locked gate. It's like, what's happened? Well, you know what happens when you go in through a door that closes behind itself and locks. If you've ever been in you've been in IT and things like that, right? So you'll have to go through a series of doors.
Yes.
But when you go through one door, it closes behind you and locks. And when you try to go back out through that door without the ID or the scanner, you can't go back out through that door.
Indeed.
Well, this is the same thing that's happened with people that have gone through all these doors without understanding fiqh. They've tried to do the complex stuff, got confused, then went back to the smaller books, and now that door is locked as well.
Right.
So it's like, why did this happen to? Well, it happened because you start off. Now, it's not the end of the line for those people, but what's happened is it's stunted their growth. So now it's going to take them longer to start from the beginning again and start again.
Right. Yeah, they have to restart.
They have to restart, and it's going to be a lot of problems. Now, if you're not prideful, you'll be okay. You'll go through a lot of pain. It's like if you've ever had a muscle injury. If you're not proud, then you'll have to be rebuilt from the lower weights. But if you're proud, no, I'm going to start lifting exactly the weight that I had when I got injured. I don't schmizio. I don't care anything about that. I'm going back in and get re-injured.
There are no rest days.
That's it. I'm going to get re-injured. It's like, this is wrong because you're going to have to start again. And that's the whole reason why the Sahaba and others, why they taught in a systematic fashion. Even the Sahaba, they taught in a systematic fashion. Go from here, then here. Build from here, then build here. Right? And Sheikh Abu Anas Muhammad Ahmad Rashid is just one example of that. And I wanted to look at his biography because it gives us a good understanding of that. Now, some of the students came together and prepared a biography on him, which I want to touch upon.
Yeah, that would be grateful.
It's on the blog in detail for those that want to go into it. So all the tarajim of all the sheikhs he studied with is there, including the sources of where the tarajim come from, because I thought that was very useful to get understanding of just like, what is it like to be a faqih? Like, who are you taking from? Who are you learning knowledge from? What's the rank of the people you're taking? Like, what on earth does this look like? Right. So that's what I wanted to do. Now, the Shaykh Abu Anas Muhammad ibn Ahmad al-Rashid was born in the year 1369, which coincides to 1950, in the city of Doum, Rif Damashq Governorate. And he learned his knowledge at the Al-Furqan Mahad for Ulum al-Shar'iyya, known as Mahad al-Furqan lil-Ulum al-Shar'iyya in Damascus. Now, he learned from a number of sheikhs both in Doum and Damascus, and he kept the companionship of scholars. Now, this is an important area. You have suhba and luzum. Suhba is the companionship that you keep of sheikhs and teachers, and there are 3 rings for it. There are some who are keeping the suhba for the barakah. They're not necessarily doing a lot of note taking or anything, but they're there for the barakah and they're taking the knowledge. This is okay. And people have to be careful not to do inkar on those people, because that barakah keeps those people afloat and gives them additional benefit. But you have to recognize those people. These are people, they're not necessarily scholars, but they're always there. They're taking the barakah, they're taking the benefit. And those things keep them energized. And those people, that's what keeps them grounded, because they may be in a job where they're surrounded by kuffar or sinful people, and it keeps them from falling into those things. And so I tell people, don't do inkar on people when you see them. Oh, he's not doing notes. He's not doing this. Don't do inkar on those people, because those people have value. The second category is those who are going through the process of where they're there for the bayan, then they're there for the halaqah, right? So the bayan is those people they're taking from it where you're advising them, you're giving some wa'az. Hey, make sure to do this, make sure to do that. Those people, they get benefit from that. They get energized. It awakens them. Then they're there for the halaqah phase. The halaqah phase is where you're doing targeted halaqat on the importance of knowing your wudu, the importance of knowing your salah. You're not necessarily going through a book, although you might be quoting from the book. You're quoting from it. But you're quoting sections that you know they need. Istinja, wudu, salah. They're getting halaqat. And those people might go away, or they might come in and come out. Now, the next is the dars stage. And the dars stage is where you're going through kutub. Now, those people might be taking one kitab, and that's it. So there's some people that they've done the primer or the ajwiba, and that's it. Alhamdulillah. I don't see him again. That's fine. Alhamdulillah. Right? But then there is the luzum stage. The luzum is different to suhbah. The luzum are those people that are studying those kutub because they're going to be teaching and replace that person after that person's gone. Because they understand, okay, this person won't be around forever.
Oh.
Right? So I'm going to take as much as I can or all if I can. So when that person's gone, I will continue teaching on the This is luzum. Right? This is luzum. So some of his most outstanding sheikhs, they include Shaykh Ahmad Al-Shami. So the Shaykh Ahmad Al-Shami dies 1414. One of the big imams. He is the father of Imam Salih Al-Shami, Hafidhullah, the big hadith marjan in his own right. He is the father of Abdurrahman Al-Shami, big imam whose emphasis is in fiqh. Right? Big imam. Imam Ahmad Al-Shami is the sheikh of most of the sheikhs today that study the madhahib. Besides Usama al-Hamadani, Sheikh Faris ibn Falih al-Khazraji also took from Abdurrahman al-Shami, who's student. Right? You also have Imam Muhammad al-Sayyid, also been to Damascus, he'd been to Ad-Dumi, he'd taken from him. Right? Many different people learned from him. And Imam Ahmad al-Shami is the student, one of the students of Mustafa ibn Ahmad al-Shati. Right? And Abdul Qadir ibn Badran is one of those students, right, as well. So he read to him Dalil al-Talib, and he also read Manar al-Sabil al-Sharh, and he delved deeply into it. He spent 11 years. So he spent 8 with the Dalil, but it wound up being 11 because of the Manar al-Sabil and everything else. Reading the Dars with the Sheikh, he would then research and go home and do detailed research on a number of matters. Now, before the Sheikh would go read to a Shami, he would review over and refer to some of the larger books to prepare himself to read to the Sheikh, because Imam Ahmad al-Shami did Tahqiq al-Masa'il, which is where you ask follow-up questions. Right? So he would read Al-Mughni, he'd read Al-Mughni, Al-Insaf, Al-Buhuti's commentary on Al-Iqna', and his commentary on Al-Muntaha, and also other texts on the given masala. So let's say they covered Al-Istinja, the Bab al-Istinja. Came out the next day. He would have gone over that Bab in all those books. So that way he's prepared in case he gets asked questions. Because he knows I'm probably going to get asked under the Tahqiq al-Masail, I'm going to be asked questions. So in the course of going through those books, he wound up going through those ones as well. So the Sheikh Ahmad al-Shami, after he completed each volume of Manar al-Sabil, he would give him ijaza in each volume. Okay, you understood this volume? You understood? Okay, ijaza in each volume. Now here's something interesting. When this happened, Imam Abdurrahman al-Shami said, you know, I haven't witnessed anyone read Dalil al-Talib's commentary gave him after tell you the level of Sheikh Abu Anis's knowledge that he would give him ijaza immediately after completing the volume. Because normally you get tested. He would test it. So you get tested by the sheikh or the teacher. Okay, what about this? Read to me this, read to me that. He gets tested, and then when you find proficiency in it. Now, part of the reason why he gave ijaza immediately after is because, remember the review I was telling you he was doing? He's reviewing the muqni, he's reviewing, like he's doing all this. So when he comes and he's being asked Tahqiq al-Masail, he's showing this prodigious level of knowledge. So he doesn't need to be tested out.
Okay. So Shaykh Abdurrahman al-Shami, Hafidhullah, he says that his father gave Shaykh Abu Anas an ijaza immediately without testing him, though he must have been tested normally.
That's it. So it's because what's happening is Shaykh Abu Anas is reviewing all the masa'il in that bab. He's reviewing all the masa'il in the upcoming bab. He's reading the bab in the said text. Then he's coming to class. When they do Tahqiq al-Masail on the bab before they start, He's going through that and displaying that level of proficiency. Then they're doing it, that bab in class. Then the next bab said, okay, next class we have this bab. The Shaykh is reviewing the following bab. The bab before it. Then tahqiq al-masa'il is done on the previous bab, which the Shaykh shows us that. Shows proficiency in the new bab. Goes through that. Finishes. Then at the end of the next bab, he says, do you have any questions? No, because he didn't have any questions because he's already done the tahqiq al-masa'il through that.
Wow. SubhanAllah.
So that tells you the level of preparation he's doing. And the writer, the scribe for the ijazah is Abdurrahman al-Shami. He's the scribe that's writing down the ijazah for his father when he's giving Shaikh Ar-Rashid. Now, he also read Rahbi's Rahbiyah with Mardini's commentary to Imam Ahmad al-Shami. That's also where he studied that from. So he learned from him. Now, in addition to this, Shaykh Abu Anas, he also studies with the Shaykh Abdul Majid, known as Al-Hanbali al-Saghir. He studies with him, who was one of the mujaddids in his time. He was with him for many years, and he studied Taghlabi's Sharh on the Dalil. He studied Taghlabi's Sharh on the Dalil. And Taghlabi's Sharh on the Dalil, who's another Dumid, Taghlabi was brilliant because he calls it a hashia, but it's really a sharh. Because although it's brief, although it's so concise, it's profound, the stuff he would pull out. Like he would pull out things, profundities in there that you think, oh yeah, this is just something that's really simple. But then he'd pull out some profundity. Like he's the one that pulled out the issue regarding the under the book of wudu. He's the one that pulled out. I said someone might think that this is a mistake on the part of the author. He said it's not, because the damir, the actual pronoun, is referring to something masculine. That's why the number is feminine.
Okay.
Like he pulled that type of thing out. It's brilliant, absolutely brilliant. The Shaykh studied. Abu Anas studied with Shaykh Faris Sarawil Ad-Dumi, who is a major Shaykh Sarawil, like studied with Abdul Majid, and also Shaykh Uthman al-Khatib. Major figures. He studied with Shaykh Abdul Qadir al-Hattawi Ad-Dumi, who's again another one. He's known as Bahr al-Ulum, the ocean of the sciences. These are people that are mujaddids, like Abdul Majid is a mujaddid. Bahr al-Ulum, Hattawi is a mujaddid. And now keep this in mind. Imam Ismail Badran, Hafidullah, has studied with Imam Ahmad al-Shami, Abdul Qadir Hattawi, and also Abdul Majid. He studied with these three, like he studied three mujaddids. Right? So Shaykh Abu Anas is studying along the same lines, but he also studies with the Shaykh Abdul Karim al-Rifa'i. Now, Abdul Karim al-Rifa'i was a Shafi'i Shaykh who dies 1393. And he learned from that Shaykh a number of lessons, and he was actually he did luzum of that Shaykh, and he did luzum of him up until the day Abdul Karim al-Rifa'i died.
Wow. SubhanAllah.
And it's the same thing with Abdul Qadir al-Hattawi. And it's the same thing with Imam Ahmad al-Sham.
Wow.
And it's the same thing with Shaykh Faris Sarawiyah. He did luzum until they died. Now, he was also with the Shaykh Usama ibn Abdul Karim al-Rifa'i, who's the current Mufti of Syria. That's the son of Abdul Karim al-Rifa'i. Now, Shaykh Abu Anas was with Shaykh Usama 30 years. 30 years. And he did big books with him.
Allah.
Big books like Ash-Sharh al-Kabir by Shamsuddin al-Qudama, because it's covered comparative fiqh. He did Imam al-Nawawi's al-Majmu'ah. He did grammar texts with the Shaykh. Right? So he did Mughni al-Labib in grammar. He also did Awdah al-Masalik. Right? He also did the Sharh Qatr al-Nida, which is a grammar text. Right? These are main source kutub and beneficial texts by Ibn Hisham, He did Imam al-Suyuti's Sharh on Jam al-Jawami'. This is covering Usul and Usul Hadith in these affairs. Tremendous amount of knowledge. Tremendous amount of knowledge. So if you think about it, 30 years of doing Luzum with someone, how much you're going to get from that person. 30 years of ilm. And he was considered one of his senior-most students. Senior-most. The Sheikh studies with Sheikh Abdul Qadir Al-Arnaout, who Arnaout is our word for the area in Albania. And he studies Busrawi's commentary, which is Al-Ba'ath Al-Hadith, Sharh Ikhtisar Ulum Al-Hadith. He studied with Sheikh Muhammad Naeem Al-Uqsusi. And this Sheikh Al-Uqsusi was one of the senior scholars of Quran and Qira'at. He was a muhaddith. He was a Shafi'i Faqih. He died 1371. Major figure, major scholar. He learned from teachers such as Muhyiddin Abul Hasan Al-Kurdi, who we're all familiar with his knowledge, and Abdul Karim Al-Rifa'i, and others. Now, the Sheikh learned the Sahih of Imam Bukhari and other kutub of tafsir, hadith. He studied Shafi'i fiqh comparatively, and he also learned sarf, mustalah al-hadith, and usul fiqh. So he had this opportunity to learn knowledge. And he had tremendous knowledge in terms of gathering together what these sheikhs have given him and then imparting it.